So this woman calls her husband and says, I have good news and bad news. So he says, listen, I'm very, very sorry, dear. I'm very busy at the moment. I don't have too much time to talk, so just give me the good news. So she says, okay, the airbags work. This woman calls her husband and says, there's trouble with the car, it won't start. There's water in the carburetor. So the husband says, water in the carburetor? That's ridiculous. What do you know about a carburetor? What would you know about water in the carburetor? She says, no, I'm telling you, there's water in the carburetor. She says, right, where's the car? In the lake. So there's this very popular theme song we're all familiar with, the theme song of The Lion King, and it's called The Circle of Life. And aside from being a very nice song, and no, I'm not singing for you, it captures a very common perspective on human existence, that life is all about circles. Nature is circular. Day and night and the seasons of the year and the revolution of the planets, and there's birth and there's growth and there's deterioration and there's death and then there's birth all over again, and it's all circular. And that's the way many cultures and many religions look at life. Judaism, however, categorically rejects the notion of the circle of life. The very first word of the Torah is Bereshis, in the beginning. We focus on beginnings. In 6 weeks, we're going to celebrate Rosh Hashanah, a beginning. In less than 2 weeks, we'll have Rosh Chodesh, the beginning of a month, the beginning. Shabbat is the separation between the end of the week and the beginning of the next. Beginnings. To believe in beginnings means that you believe in the power of change, that nothing is fixed, not your personality, not your lifestyle, not your destiny. There's always the opportunity for a new beginning. There's no rule of nature that says that your life has to stay the way it is, and you go round and round this rotating circle of life. No, we're into new beginnings. So if life is not a circle, how do we see the cycles of life? The answer is we see them as a spiral. Each cycle brings you to a new level. So yes, it'll be Rosh Hashanah again, but not the same Rosh Hashanah as last year. It's a new one, because the spiral takes us to a higher place. Rosh Chodesh will be a new Rosh Chodesh that the world had never seen before, that no one has experienced before. Yes, we're going in a circular way, but we're going in a spiral higher and higher. You're all familiar with the creation of Adam and Eve and the very first commandment, and it didn't take long for man to mess up. The text of the Bible tells us that God calls out to Adam and says, Ayeka. Ayeka means, where are you? And the obvious question, did God not know where Adam was hiding, that God couldn't find him? So our sages say, no, Ayeka, it was a rhetorical question on God's part. Adam, man, where are you? What happened to you? A few hours ago, you were at the highest of heights. And where are you now? Now you're hiding like some squirrel in the bushes. The rhetorical question of Ayeka was not only asked of Adam back then, it's a question asked of every human being at all times. Ayeka, where are you? What are we doing with our lives? And what are we doing in relation to our potential, what we could be doing? The tragedy of Adam was his failure to realize his incredible potential. By contrast, we study about a man who realized his vast potential, and his name was Abraham. And as we spoke in this room, for those that were with me yesterday, about the binding of Isaac, God calls upon Abraham to sacrifice his beloved son Isaac and to take him through this challenge, this great test, this final 10th test of faith of Abraham. So there was Abraham facing the ultimate test of his devotion, taking the life of his only son from his wife Sarah, the son whom he loved so dearly and in whom he had placed all of his hopes. He raises the knife to do this unfathomable thing when suddenly the voice of God in the form of an angel calls out, Avraham, Avraham, Abraham, Abraham, and stayed his hand, and you know the rest of the story. Simple question. Did the angel have a stutter? Why Abraham, Abraham? Why not Abraham? Why does he call his name out twice? So the Medrash explains that this was reference to two Abrahams. You see, the Medrash says there was Avraham de La'ela, there was a heavenly Abraham. And there's Avraham Letata, there was an earthly Abraham. There is an image of Abraham that exists in heaven. That Abraham is perfect Abraham. What God had in mind when God created the soul of Abraham. All of the potential of Abraham is in that heavenly Abraham. And then there's mortal Abraham, the physical man on earth. And at that moment, at that 10th and final test, something incredible happened. Avraham, Avraham. Those two Abrahams, the earthly Abraham and the heavenly Abraham, coalesced and became one. At that moment, Abraham achieved the purpose for which was created in its maximum capacity, bringing the Abraham of below into perfect conformity with the Abraham of above. The Torah is a Torah for each and every single one of us, and every story of the Torah is meant for each and every single one of us to look into it and to understand it's talking to us. There's two of us. There's two of each and every single one of us. Before we are created, God had a clear image of who we could be and who we should be in this world. And that image always remains in heaven. So think about it. You got a twin up there. You have an angelic representation of what you're capable of accomplishing and becoming in this life. And although for most of us, we're never likely to pull it off to perfection the way our forefather Abraham did, our mission in life, nonetheless, is to bring those two versions of self as close as possible to one another. That's our mission in life. Back in Poland in the 1800s, there was a young boy named Naphtali. Naphtali didn't apply himself to his studies very well. He did very bad in Cheder. His teachers, they tried to bring him into the discussion, but to no avail. They told his parents there was little hope for this Naphtali. He's not excelling in class. He's not studying well. He's not keeping up with the class. And one day the teacher comes over to the house and tells the parents, Genug, we've tried everything we can. It's not working. It's just not working. That night, when they thought Naphtali was sleeping, the parents had a discussion that, you know something, it's a waste of time. It's simply not working. So maybe we should take Naphtali out of school and we'll send him to a Schneider, a tailor. And he'll learn the art of being a tailor. At least he'll learn the trade. And then when he's old enough to get a job, he'll have a job. And he'll have a career and he'll make it in life. Cheder is not for him. Little did they know Naphtali was up. And he was listening to this entire discussion. And he runs into his parents' room and he says, Mommy, Tati, please don't give up on me yet. I'll try harder. Don't take me out of Cheder just yet. The rest, as they say, is history. This young boy grew up to become known as the Netziv, author of some of the classic writings of the Torah. He held the position of dean of one of the largest yeshivas in Poland. And at a celebration marking the completion of his magnum opus, he stood up and he told the story to his thousands of students about that fateful night that he overheard his parents discussing his future. And he then went on to describe what his life might have been like had his father gone ahead with the plan to apprentice him to a tailor. What would have been, he said, I think I would have been a decent, honest, hardworking tailor. Not only that, I would have gone to synagogue every single morning. I wouldn't have missed a minyan in the morning. I would have gone every afternoon and evening for mincha and ma'ariv services. I probably would have gone to the daily class of the rabbi, and I'm sure I would have tithed. And I would have been good to my customers. And if they weren't happy, I wouldn't argue with them. I would just redo the suit for them. And after 120 years in this world, I would have made my way to the heavenly world. And they would say, Naphtali, where are the 15 books you were supposed to author on the Torah? And I would look at them and I would say, what? I'm a Schneider. I'm a tailor. I'm a good tailor. And they would say, yeah, Naphtali, you were a beautiful Jew, and we appreciated the Shachris, the Mincha, Ma'ariv, the Tzedakah. All that was beautiful. But where are the thousands of students you were supposed to have in your yeshiva in Poland? And I would say, thousands of me? I'm a dropout. I didn't make it through 6th grade. And then they would show me the angelic form of Naphtali, of what he was meant to accomplish, what might have been. Think about a 9-year-old kid lying in a bed in a little house in Poland overhearing a conversation. Had he let that moment pass unchallenged, what would have been lost? Not just to him, but to his entire generation, to us today who study his works. So who knows, my friends, who knows how far off track we may be for the mission and the purpose for which we were created, that we're capable of achieving in our lifetimes. Now, true, few of us were going to be an Abraham or a Netziv, but let there be no doubt about it. We each have our own unique greatness. We each have special gifts and talents which we can serve God, and we can serve humanity, and serve the Jewish people, that were given to us. Ayeka. So where are we? How close are we to matching up to our potential? A century ago, there lived this great symphony conductor, an Italian maestro named Arturo Toscanini. Toscanini was one of the most acclaimed musicians of the late 19th and 20th century, known for his perfectionism to detail. He was an absolute perfection when it came to playing the music and the writing of music. Toscanini had a biographer, and the biographer would interview him periodically over the years as part of a major book he was writing on his life. And one evening, he called Toscanini and he told him that he would be in town the next night, and he asked if he can come over to interview him some more. And Toscanini said, no, tomorrow night, absolutely not. I am very busy. I am doing something that will require absolute concentration. I can't be interrupted. The biographer is curious, well, what is it that you're doing that's so special? So he said, there's a concert being played overseas. I used to be the conductor of that symphony orchestra, but I couldn't be there this year. So they've set up for me something called shortwave radio, that I'm actually able to listen to them playing my music overseas. And when I'm going to be listening to that, I don't want to hear any interruptions. So the biographer says, Maestro, it would be such a pleasure if I can come just to watch you as you listen to your symphony being played. I won't say a word. I won't disturb you. I just want to sit and watch. Toscanini says, if you promise not to interrupt, by all means. And sure enough, he comes. And he sits, and indeed, the shortwave radio is set up, and he's listening. And to the biographer, it was magnificent. Toscanini is deep within it, thinking every single second, listening to every note. And the symphony is over, and the biographer claps. And Toscanini says, it wasn't that good. He says, what do you mean it wasn't that good? It sounded great. He says, no. I wrote that for 120 musicians, including 15 violinists. Only 14 violinists were playing. Now, the biographer says, crazy. There's no way in the world from overseas he knows 120 musicians with only 119, one violinist. How does he know? He doesn't say a word. He promised that night it was not going to be an interview. But the next morning, he calls the concertor overseas. He gets in touch with them, and he says, can I speak? It's very important. I'm Toscanini, the biographer. I have to speak to the individual that conducted the symphony last night. He speaks to him, and he says, how many musicians were there last night? He says there was supposed to be 120, but one violinist called in sick in the last minute. He's amazed, and he goes back to Toscanini. How did you know? How did you possibly know? And Toscanini says there's a great difference between you and me. You're a part of the audience, and to the audience, it sounds wonderful. But I'm the conductor, and the conductor knows every piece of music that has to be played. He knows every note that he wrote. When I realized that certain notes were not being played, I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that one violinist wasn't there. We say in our prayers in the high holidays, every being comes before God with his deeds and his tafkid, his purpose. We're judged not only on the basis of our deeds, but how they measured up against our tafkid, our unique purpose in this world. We're all different. We each play a different instrument. We each play different music. And yet we're all part of the great symphony of the Jewish people. And if we don't contribute the special notes that we are capable of, that were written for us to play, maybe those around us won't notice. But the conductor notices. The conductor knows that one violinist didn't show up that day. The winter of 1946, a young man by the name of Shimon found himself in a DP camp in Germany. Shimon was a survivor of numerous death camps. He had committed to memory the brutal faces and the names of the Nazi tormentors, never to forget what those monsters did to him and to 6 million of his brothers and sisters. One day, there was an American rabbi there who served as the chaplain of that DP camp. And this American rabbi asked Shimon if he would join him on a very difficult trip. The United States Army had learned that there was a castle in Bavaria that the Nazis had designated to be a museum to the extinct Jewish race. They actually prepared that there should be a museum one day to say, once upon a time, there was a Jewish people. And here are the artifacts of that once upon a time people. And to this castle, they would send massive shipments of Judaica, of books and religious articles that they had looted from Jewish homes and synagogues all over Europe. Anyway, once the United States Army got wind of this, they asked this chaplain to go check it out. The chaplain didn't want to go by himself. So he asked Shimon if Shimon would come with him. And they would go through the contents of this quote-unquote castle museum, and they would report back their findings. So they traveled to Bavaria, and upon entering the castle, the two men gasped at the enormity of what they saw. It was a massive warehouse, and it was filled from floor to ceiling with all types of ceremonial and ritual items. Torah scrolls, tefillin, talesim, books, paintings, menorahs, seder plates, candlesticks, kiddush cups, endless piles and piles and piles of Judaica. A silence came over them as they contemplated the ghosts of the absent owners of all these items. Every one of these items belonged to a Jewish home. Every one of these kiddush cups were held at a Friday night Shabbat meal. Every one of these candlesticks once graced the Shabbos table. Every Seder plate was once the center of a beautiful family Seder. Everything they saw represented our people that were now ashes. They walked so silently throughout the room, each one going in a different direction of this castle, touching every single item, trying to feel connected to the people for which these items represented. Suddenly, as Shimon was at one end of the castle, he heard the chaplain crying out from the other. He ran towards the scream, and he found the chaplain sitting on the floor. His head was bowed, tears were streaming down his face, and without saying a word, he handed Shimon the object he was holding in his hand. It was a simple siddur. It was a Jewish prayer book. Nothing extraordinary, Shimon thought. What about this siddur has brought about this response from the chaplain? At that point, the chaplain pointed to the inscription inside. The owner of the siddur had scrawled the following message: I am begging whoever finds this siddur to do whatever you can to avenge the death of the Jews of Europe. It was signed by a woman whose name Shimon did not recognize, but the chaplain did. My sister, he said. That's my sister. You see, the chaplain was fortunate enough to have left Europe way before the war. His sister had remained. And he had been desperately seeking news about her whereabouts, but found nothing until that moment in a castle in Bavaria. Amongst tens of thousands of items, somehow that siddur finds itself into his hands. The woman had apparently written those words in desperation just before her death. Her final scribble read, "They are coming. The murderers are among us. I hear them in the next house. Please, please, avenge our deaths." The chaplain let out a cry of his sister's name that pierced Shimon's heart. It was at that moment that Shimon felt that he had been summoned from the heavens. He decided then and there that he would dedicate the rest of his life to providing the justice that the blood of this woman and 6 million others was crying out for. This man would become known as Simon Wiesenthal, the courageous Nazi hunter who tracked down more than 1,000 evil perpetuators of the Holocaust. The title of Simon Wiesenthal's first book, "The Murderers Among Us," were the words he borrowed from the chaplain's sister's siddur, a memorial to the woman whose cry from the grave helped establish the mission and purpose for the rest of his life. Ladies and gentlemen, throughout our lives, we're sent these signals, these prompts from heaven calling upon us to embark on a certain mission. A mission that's specific to our abilities, to our talents, to our resources, to our influences. The heavenly image of ourselves is beckoning us, the earthly image of ourselves, to synchronize our deeds to our tafkid, to our purpose. We sense it, we're inspired by it, but then invariably we shrug it off and nothing happens. Another missed opportunity to make a difference, to make a special impact. So why does it happen? Why do we tend to hear the message and then try to push it away? Why don't we step up to the plate when opportunity knocks? And I think that part of the answer to the question can be found in the story of the greatest public servant the Jewish people ever had, Moses. Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses who took us out of Egypt, Moses who gave us the Torah at Mount Sinai, Moses who led us for 40 years in the desert, Moses who turned a family of slaves into a nation of princes. How did it come to be for Moses to take this job? So there is the story of the burning bush, right? Moses runs away, he's in the wilderness, he has his flock, a flock gets lost, he goes after it, and he sees this burning bush. The bush is being consumed by fire, but the bush itself is not being burnt. And God calls out to him. By the way, he calls out Moshe, Moshe. Remember that, right? Double name again. And what does God say? I want you to go down. It's time to take the Jewish people out of Egypt. And Moses is at first excited that the Exodus will take place. But when it comes to this job opportunity, what does Moses say? No, you got the wrong guy. You got to be making a mistake. I mean, it sounds great. Exodus, Pharaoh, all that. To let my people go. All this is great, but not me. And God says, no, I didn't make a mistake. My computer system is pretty accurate today. No, you're the guy. Does Moses accept that? No, he continues to argue. Now, Moses will present some arguments. One of the arguments is, God, I stutter. I'm not a person that can speak. I'm not eloquent. If you're looking for a leader to speak to Pharaoh and to inspire the Jewish people, you need an eloquent speaker. You need Eli Wiesel. He didn't say exactly that, but he meant, you can't have me. I stutter, I don't speak clearly. And God says, no, I meant you. And the argument continues. Shlach nabiyat tishlach. Send the one that you should send. The commentaries explain he's referring to his older brother Aaron. My brother Aaron, he's 3 years older than me. He's living in Egypt at the time. He's looked up to as a leader. He's a good guy. He's a righteous man. Why are you sending me? Send him. And God says, no, I have the right guy. The argument, by the way, takes place over a period of 7 days. For 7 days, Moses is saying no, and God's saying yes. Here's my question. Why doesn't God ever answer him? Why doesn't God ever respond to what Moses is saying? All God continues to say is, you're the guy. Why doesn't God say, Moses, you're worrying about stuttering? No problem. I'll fix it. And when you remember I Dream of Jeannie, da-da, da-da, blink, right? Only a few of you remember. That's okay. I mean, you're God. Fix it. He's a stutterer. He's telling you he can't because he stutters. Fix it. He no longer stutters. Look, Moses, open your mouth. Shakespeare comes out, right? You're God. You can do it. You're worried about Aaron? Don't worry. Let me tell you what I have in mind. Aaron's going to be the high priest, and it's going to be a great partnership between the two brothers. He's going to be used for his strength here. Respond. Moses is putting legitimate arguments on the table. Respond. The answer is that God is teaching us, you and me, and every human being, an important lesson for all time. You don't have to be perfect to take the job. Moses is saying, I'm not perfect, I can't do it. Had God then said, okay, let me make you perfect, forever we would have that excuse to say, I can't do it because, and we would each fill in the sentence. We each know where we're not perfect. We each know our weaknesses, and anytime an opportunity will present itself, we're going to fall back on those excuses. So God says, Moses, as a stutterer, go to Pharaoh. Because I'm not looking for perfection. I'm looking for someone that's willing to step up to the plate and act. And with that, Moses takes the job, and he takes the people out of Egypt, and he gives them the Torah, and he becomes the greatest leader of all time. Friends, we're all constantly being presented with such moments, with pivotal and decisive moments that beckon us to do something meaningful and significant. Whether it's to elevate our own lives, those of our family members, or to strengthen the community, or just about on a daily basis to help another individual. Every day, every single one of us will find an opportunity that we can help somebody. There's not a day that will go by for each and every single one of us in this room that there will not be an opportunity presented to us that we can affect someone's life in a positive way. And very often when those opportunities come, there are smarter people here that can help that person. There are wealthier people here that can find them a job. There's always those excuses of why not me, why someone else. To which God says, I appreciate your humility. In fact, I love humility, but this is not the time for it. This is the time for you to step up to the plate and do your thing. This is your moment. So seize the moment. The comedian Jay Leno once pointed out that in a recent poll, 1 in 4 people say that they would donate a kidney to a complete stranger. 25% of people polled said that if the opportunity came, they would donate a kidney to a stranger. Says Jay Leno, really? 90% of those same people won't let a car merge into their lane during traffic. But a kidney, I'll give that guy a kidney. Sure, I'll give him a kidney. You won't let him cut in front of you. If he does, my goodness, it's the end of the world. See, in theory, we're all ready and willing to do a lot of things. The question is when it comes to action, when it comes to actually doing those things, where are we? Ayeka, where are we? And sometimes it's the simplest deed that can make the greatest difference. The Lubavitcher Rebbe taught us the very fact that you encounter someone who's in trouble or who is in need means that in some way you can help that person. Otherwise, why would this awareness have entered your world? If that opportunity enters your radar screen, it's in itself proof positive that this is your moment. So seize it. It may be a turning point in your life or a turning point in the other person's life, but the moment is there for you to act. One of the scenic hiking trails on Israel is the Yehudiya. It's a nice hiking trail. It's got some steep climbs in it, and it's only meant for experienced hikers. So one day, this 19-year-old girl named Plea, her 16-year-old brother named Yisrael, decided they were going to give it a shot. They wanted a challenge, and they went on this hiking trail. They were doing okay until they came to this very steep point where you had to climb literally straight up. Yisrael, the 16-year-old, braved the tall climb, but Plea couldn't do it. She was too scared. The brother was up on top trying to coach her. Just do it, you can do it. This is where you put your foot, this is how you do it. No go. She was just too scared. So she says to her brother, you go to the end and call for help. So the boy runs to the end of the trail. He finds the sign with the emergency number. 5 minutes later, 2 rangers pull up in a pickup truck. In the back of the pickup truck, they have a stretcher, they have these ropes, they have some metal hooks, and they were going to go down and get the girl up, bring her up with a stretcher. Your sister injured? They said, no, she's not injured. So what's wrong? Why did you call? She's afraid. She's just scared. So they say, okay, just stay here. We'll be back soon with her. A little while later, the rangers return, and Plea is there smiling. Everything is fine. And the brother asks his sister, Nusa, what was it like being pulled up the stretcher with the pulleys and everything? What was it like? Did you enjoy the ride? And she says, no, I climbed it. So he says, I don't understand. When I was asking you to climb, you said you couldn't, you were scared. Now you're telling me you climbed it. So she said, these 2 guys came. And the taller one came down to where I was. And he said to me, we can either take you up on the stretcher and hook it up with the pulleys and the ropes, which is fine, or you can climb it yourself. So I said to him, but I'm afraid. I'm terrified. So the man turned to me and he said, look at me. Look at me. Ani choma. I am a wall. I want you to think of me as a wall. Ta'ali, you go up. I'm a wall right behind you. And suddenly my fear dissipated. I felt totally secure that if I did fall back, my new friend, the wall, would be there to catch me. And so I climbed up rather easily. It's a very simple story. My friends, life is a trail, often a steep and treacherous one. And sometimes people we know can, God forbid, find themselves in a crisis. Whether it's financial woes, a divorce, God forbid, a child who's not well, the loss of a loved one, and they're overcome with anxiety and despair. And they're frozen in fear and they cannot cope with reality. That's when we can be a tall Israeli park ranger. We stand firmly behind them and say, Ani choma, I am your wall. Ta'ali, go up, lean on me, forge ahead. I'm here for you, to brace you, to support you, to catch you. Don't be afraid. Do we even realize what something like that can do for a person at such a time? By simply offering words of support, words from the heart, words from the soul. Wow. My daughter just gave birth to a baby boy. Thank you. Thank you. There was once this rabbi in New York who, during the intermediate days of the holiday of Passover, Chol HaMoed, kids are off from school, so we got to come up with things for the kids to do. Chol HaMoed can somehow come out 4 days of intermediate days, so you got to come up with 4 days of ideas of what you do with your kids to keep them busy. When we were growing up in Brooklyn, it meant Coney Island. Then when they opened up Great Adventures in New Jersey, it was Great Adventures. My poor father, all of us, would have to schlep me to the Bronx Zoo and to this place and to that place to keep us busy. So there was this father in New York who had a large family. He had 11 children. 7 of them were young. And as much as he can come up with the aquariums and amusement parks, he just ran out of things to do. And suddenly he had this brainstorm. Without telling the kids what they were doing, he said, everybody pile in the van. We're going on a trip. Oh, they were excited they're going on a trip. Where are we going? It's a surprise. So 7 of the 11 kids pile in the van, and they're driving to an unknown destination, and suddenly they see signs. JFK Airport. Wow, Dad is splurging this time. He's taking us to Disney World in Florida. Oh, we're going somewhere exotic. This is unbelievable. They're starting to dance for joy. Now, the father realizes that the expectations are too high. So he says, no kinderlach, we're not going on a plane. So where are we going? You'll see. But he continues following the signs to JFK Airport. Where are we going, Tati? Where are we going? And he parks the car in the airport. Tati, where are you taking us? And he says, on the train. JFK Airport has something called the air train. Anyone been on the air train in JFK Airport? The air train goes around and around and around and keeps on going. It stops by every terminal. It even stops by the rent-a-car place. It just keeps on going. And the kids say, we're doing the what? We're going on the air train today. And he hands to each kid a piece of paper and a pen. And he says, this is what we're going to do. Each time that the air train goes around the airport, I'm going to give you a competition. One time it was going to be, how many planes do you see that have a flag of a particular country? How many times do you see a name of this? How many times? It was competition. And each time the train would go around, there was another game to play. And the kids are actually enjoying this. There's a creative thinking, and they're going around and around and around, and they're having a fun time. At some point, at one of the stops, this pilot walks onto the train. He's holding his attaché case. There's no seats, so the father immediately tells some of his kids, get up, do the right thing, stand up for your elders, let him sit. And the pilot says, oh, no. I've been sitting all day. I could use some standing time. He says, is this a class trip, a school trip? He says, no, they're mine. All yours. He says, actually, there's 4 more at home. Wow. So where you heading off to today? We're not really going anywhere. So why are you on the train? Chalamoid. And he begins to explain it's the holiday of Passover, commemorates the Exodus. We mark it every single year, and the kids are off from school, intermediate days, and I have to find things for them to do, and the competition. He's explaining and explaining everything. And the pilot is intrigued by this. It's brilliant. And what are those funny strings that the boys have? And he explains, sits down, what's the yarmulke? He starts asking a lot of questions. They're having a great discussion. The pilot says, it's amazing. It really is. It's very interesting. He says, I've been a pilot for more than 20 years. My schedule is that I fly for 3 weeks straight, and then I get a week off. But even during that week off, I don't get to spend much time at home because my last flight ends in Australia, and I live in Denver. So by the time I get home, there's very little time until I have to take off again. My wife left me years ago because I was never there for her and the kids, and I can't blame her. It's a tough life being the spouse of a pilot. But you know what's so ironic, the pilot said? When I fly my plane, I know exactly what my point of departure is and where I'm headed. In that little computer that we have the entire globe in there. I could point any destination on the globe, and this plane will take me exactly there. But when I finish the flight, I have nowhere to go. No family, no children, just an empty hotel room. So although I'm always going somewhere, in reality, I'm going nowhere. But here I'm watching you and your family. You're going around and around and around. You're going nowhere. And yet, you're going somewhere. You're going somewhere very special. You live by traditions. You live by values. You place your family above all else. You have goals and you have destinations in sight. For a family that's just going in circles, boy, are you going places. You have something beautiful there. Enjoy the rest of your holiday. And the rabbi watched as the pilot stepped off the train, walked down the platform. A lonely figure with his shoulders straight and carrying his small little suitcase. And he turned towards his children, happy and secure. A living testimony to the beauty of traveling through life with a clear idea of what the destination is and how to get there. A wise man once said, some people don't know where they want to go, but they complain a lot about not getting there. So let's not get trapped in this circle of life. Rather, let's embrace new beginnings, new opportunities. This is not just a prescription for a life of substance, but also a life of happiness, for true joy and happiness. You know, you ask people what their goal in life may be, and they always say, my goal is to be happy, but it doesn't work out that way. Happiness itself is not a goal. It's a byproduct. It's a byproduct of a life lived with purpose. Henry David Thoreau once said, happiness is like a butterfly. The more you chase it, the more it will elude you. But if you turn your attention to other things, it will come and sit softly on your shoulders. This is how it works with happiness. It's when we're not actively pursuing it and we're busy with matters of substance that it will find you. It will find you in ways you might have never dreamed possible. I'll conclude with this story. A number of years ago, there was a woman who lived in Ramat Gan, Israel. Mrs. Lerner had a job working for this company which basically enabled her to support her entire family. She felt very fortunate. Economic times in Israel were very tough. She was lucky to have a job, lucky to work for a company, and she enjoyed her job. The problem was that she was 3 months pregnant. And the big question was whether she would still have the job waiting for her after she left to have the baby. And those days, maternity leave labor laws were not as quite dependable in Israel at the time. So she was worried. To make matters worse, her husband had been out of work for 6 months. So her paycheck supported the family. To make matters even worse, her brother was living with them because he was also unemployed. So she had her brother living with them, her husband unemployed, she had kids to raise, and she was the only income check coming in, and now she's 3 months pregnant, and although I have a few months to go, will this job be there for me when I come back? I need it. We all need it. So one afternoon, the owner of the company, we'll just call him Mr. Fisher, came by the workplace and was having lunch in the cafeteria where the employees got to take their lunch breaks. It was rather informal. And so she felt, the best time for me to speak to Mr. Fisher would be during this informal cafeteria time. I'll sit down next to him, I'll get into a conversation, I'll tell him what's going on, and maybe get that commitment so that this anxiety can be put to an end. And so she does it. She makes her way to Mr. Fisher's table. Can I talk to you for a few minutes? Sure. And she begins to say, my husband has been unemployed for 6 months. I'm so thankful that I have this job because that's what's supporting our family. And my brother has been out of a job and he lives with us and I'm so thankful. But Mr. Fisher, I don't want to tell the rest of the people that work here. I'm just going to share this with you because you're my boss. I'm 3 months pregnant, which means in 6 months I'm going to have to take some time off. And I really need to hear from you that I have this job waiting for me when I come back. And he changes the subject on her. He doesn't give her the answer she desperately needed to hear. And he calls someone else over and starts a conversation with them and with another person and another person. And soon the conversation just started into where are you originally from, where were you born, where were you born? And everyone's talking about their past. And Mr. Fisher says, and Mrs. Lerner, where were you born? And she said, I was born in East Flatbush. It's a section of Brooklyn. East Flatbush, really? Yeah. And tell me about your parents, what did they do? And he started asking all types of questions. What was your mother's maiden name? What was your grandfather's name? What synagogue did they go to? All of a sudden, this barrage of questions. And suddenly, Mr. Fisher gets up and leaves the room. A little while later, he comes back, and his eyes are red. And he tells Mrs. Lerner, I want to share a story with you. Many years ago, there were two electricians who lived in the same neighborhood in East Flatbush. One of these electricians was a union member and worked for a large company and was very successful. The other was a non-union electrician and constantly struggled to make a living. He basically scrapped it together by doing an odd job here, a small job there, whatever he could land throughout the neighborhood. These two men didn't really know one another, but they went to the same synagogue. And on Shabbat, they davened near each other. And when they would walk home from shul, they would walk home together. But that was the extent of their relationship. One day, tragedy struck. The poor electrician had a massive heart attack. And within a few days, he passed away. When the other electrician came to the house to pay condolences to visit for Shiva, he couldn't help but notice how poor the house was. So he made his way into the kitchen. And he took a look at the cupboards, and they were empty. They were bare. There was nothing. So he left the house immediately. He went to a supermarket. He stocked up bags and bags of food, and he schlepped it over, and he starts putting it into the pantry. Now, okay, a day of Shiva, people from a community do such things. But the next day, he came back, and he did it again. And the next day, and the next day. And even after Shiva was over, he just continued making these visits with bags of food, fish, and bakery goods, whatever it may be. And things that he saw broken in the house, he made sure to get fixed. And the wife of the widow says to him, I don't even know who you are. He says, it doesn't matter. I knew your husband a little bit, and it's the least I can do. And please don't stop me. Don't take away my mitzvah. And so she didn't. One day the widow says to this electrician, I have a favor to ask. In the basement of our house, there's boxes and boxes filled with electrical supplies. I have no need for it. I'm not an electrician. You are. Please, would you just take it off my hands? He says, let me go and take a look. And he goes down to the basement, and it's a mess. Anyone been to basements in Brooklyn? They're always a mess. But this one was wires everywhere, switches everywhere, all different electrical supplies. And so he asks the widow, can I come every evening and start organizing? It'll take me a while. Each evening this man shows up, and he organizes some more, and he puts things into different boxes, and he creates a roster, a list of everything that's there. And then he sends out notice to every electrician in New York that on this particular Sunday there's going to be a sale of all of these items available. And that day electricians were showing up. And thousands of dollars were raised from the sale of my husband's stuff. And of course, he handed every single penny over to this widow. The workers are sitting in this cafeteria in Ramat Gan listening to Mr. Fisher tell the story. He then turns to Mrs. Lerner and he says, the electrician who organized that sale, the man who helped that widow and those children was your grandfather, Tzvi Ackerman. And I was one of those 6 orphans who watched him do it. It was my father who died at a young age. It was my brothers and sisters when we were just kids. But none of us have ever forgotten your Zaidi, what your Zaidi did for our mother and for all of us during those sad and painful days. Mrs. Lerner, make no mistake about it. You will always have a job with this company. And tomorrow morning, please, ask your husband to come. I have a job for him. And have your brother come along as well. I have a job for him too. That night, a tearful Mrs. Lerner went home and wrote a letter to her grandfather who was still alive. All it said was, thank you, Zaidi. I'm so proud to be your granddaughter. A man in Brooklyn, New York sees the despair of a family and decides to seize the moment. and to do something about it. And it shows up decades later in Ramat Gan, Israel, for his own granddaughter, for his own great-grandchildren. That's the way special moments of our lives turn the axis of our world and have a way of repaying themselves over and over and over again. So the next time an opportunity for a mitzvah, for an act of kindness presents itself, don't pass it up. It may just be your moment, the moment God is giving you to shake up your world, to make a distinctive impact, to achieve your own cosmic notoriety rather than fade into relative insignificance. Make it count. Give of yourself, physically, spiritually, emotionally, monetarily. And if you do that, suddenly one day, you'll look over your shoulder and you'll see a little butterfly sitting right there. Happiness will come your way, not because you went looking for it, but because you set goals of substance and went about pursuing them with energy, with focus, and with enthusiasm. So go out there and seize the moment. Thank you very much.